and a couple of participants are saying that their sound is muffled. Mine seems to be okay.
Sure, let me see if I can, give me 1 second. Is that better?
Yes.
All right, sorry, switch from my AirPods to the computer. So just as a little aside, so some of you know, I'm currently living with my brother. We're doing some renovations at our house and they have 4 kids under 4. So if you hear any, all my children are at school, but if you hear any screaming or crying in the background, please know there is someone else who is their mother who is worrying about them and it's not anything I'm at all concerned about. So just as you know, as they go toward nap time, there might be a little bit of noise from them. So today, I'm gonna go back. We are gonna talk about comprehensive literacy for all, and the foundation for everything we're going to talk about today comes from this book here. It's written by Dr. Karen Eriskson and Dr. David Koppenhaver. Karen Erickson is currently the director of the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies at UNC Chapel Hill, and Dr. Koppenhaver has also been the director and now currently works at Appalachian State University, but they wrote this book together. It is kind of a second edition, if you will, of a book that they had previously published with some more up-to-date research and, you know, revised strategies and things like that. So lots of really great information. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. So just a quick overview of our agenda today. So we're just going to go over kind of the foundations for literacy. We're going to talk about literacy in AAC because I'm sure some of you are scratching your heads going, why are you talking to me about this, right? It is a subject that I really enjoy, but I hope you'll see as we're talking how AAC and literacy are so intertwined and we can't really kind of parse them out. So to do literacy instruction well, you're going to need AAC, which probably means you'll see me supporting you in some fashion. We're going to talk about who we're talking about when we say literacy for all. So like who is encompassed in that all, and then prerequisites for literacy instruction. We're going to talk about emergent literacy routines, conventional routines, and then you guys are going to get some collaboration time in your team groups as kind of the conclusion of the day. So kind of taking the information, again, I know it's going to be fast and furious, but taking the information and then kind of, you know, what do you maybe want to do or try or dip your toe into, you know, in the coming, hopefully, weeks, and always here to help support. And I think all of our coaches are in here today who are also, I'm sure, more than happy to support. So
can I just add one thing? Sorry,
yep.
I was just going to add to this is a book that you get if you take Bridget's class, but if it is not something you've been able to take and it's a book that you're interested in, feel free to email Anna or myself and we can get some orders in for it.
Awesome. Thank you. That's fantastic. So we're just going to start out here with Dr. Erickson has a keynote speech that she gave at a convention in the UK. And this quote I just kind of pulled out for us to listen to today, just kind of how these two things go together, AAC and literacy.
You can't do AAC without literacy. You will never be able to say everything you want to say, when you want to say it, to whomever you want to say, if we do not teach you to read and write. You will always be dependent on the words that someone else decided were important to put on your device. You will always be dependent on other people's ability to interpret your intended meaning. If you don't have the ability to communicate through writing.
So I just think that that's such an important quote to share. Our devices are fantastic. They have access to thousands of vocabulary words. We have the ability to quickly add as many more vocabulary words as we need. But if you are always dependent on what the old lady decided to put in your device, right? To these kids, I'm ancient. If you're always dependent on what I put into your device, you will likely never be able to say what you want to say when you want to say it. And so working toward those literacy skills is going to be really important. Is everybody going to get there? Maybe not. Some kids might be able to get to first letters. We know for students who have less intelligibility, sometimes being able to tell a communication partner that first letter of the word they're trying to say can be helpful for the partner. So if we can get our students to do some of those things, we can hopefully help kind of unlock more autonomous communication. And so that's kind of how these two things go together. So we're facilitating these literacy skills, but they are also going to help facilitate our autonomous communication. So this is just a quote from the beginning of the book, which I think speaks to something that our gen ed peers talk about a lot, our gen ed colleagues. So just that first, reading, writing, speaking, and listening can be categorized in various ways, but ultimately they're language skills and understandings that influence emergent literacy concurrently, interactively, and recursively. So when we're talking about students who are taking the WIDA assessment for access, we're talking about that listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Those are the four kind of main topics under that language arts umbrella. And so you can't do one without the other. So without communication, which a lot of our students who have complex communication needs and are non-speaking, they're going to need AAC to do that. And a lot of the strategies that we're going to talk about, especially in the emergent literacy, are helping to build those communication strategies and that independent communication for students. So who does all mean? So all is any students with complex communication needs who are using AAC, students with the most significant disabilities. In our district, we call them, multi-needs or multiple disabilities. They're students with intellectual disabilities, significant autism, as well as students who might have sensory impairments, in addition to some of these other things, right? So we might have students who have, get hearing itinerant services and also have Down syndrome, right? Or students who have vision and hearing and have Down syndrome or things like that. So these are students with really complex needs who I think typically in the history of special education are not receiving much direct, robust reading instruction. So prerequisites for literacy instruction. So there is one prerequisite for literacy instruction, and that is breathing. If you are breathing, we can work on literacy instruction. If you are not breathing and you are dead, it's probably not a good time to start it, right? And so all of our students have that prerequisite skill. They're coming to us ready to learn and to work through some of these strategies we're going to talk about today. One quote from Dr. David Yoder, who's also been a director of the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies that I just love, is no student is too anything to be able to read or write. Is it going to take us longer than their peers? Yes. Are they going to require a lot more repetition? Yes. But can we teach them foundational literacy skills? We can. I think one thing I always like to say is they're never going to learn it if we don't teach them. So if we choose not to teach it, we shouldn't be surprised when they don't learn it. Our kids are not learning lots of things through kind of like just being part of the environment through that osmosis, because they're not interacting with their environment in the same ways as their general education peers for a variety of reasons, right? And so we need to really provide the structures and strategies for them to be able to participate in these in this kind of instruction so that we can help students be readers and writers. And I'm talking like over their academic career. So our kids, a lot of times we're talking about kids who start with us when they're 3, they come to us from EI, and we have them till now through the school year that they turn 22. So we have a long time to work on these things, but I think we owe it to them to try to work on those. So one thing I want to share with you is the Literacy Bill of Rights. And so this comes from Drs. Yoder, Erickson, and Koppenhaver. It's written in 1997, right? So that's a really long time ago. I was in 8th grade in 1997. So I wasn't even thinking about being a special education teacher yet, probably. That's probably not true, but maybe wasn't quite into that yet. So I want you to just take a minute and read through these 8 rights that they're saying all students, regardless of ability or disability, have a right to. And then we're going to talk about some of these things. We're going to do a little, I'm hoping, interactive activity to try to make it work on Zoom, just talking about a couple of these rights. So I'll just give you guys a second. As you guys read through these, is there anything that jumps out as to anybody as important, or something you maybe hadn't thought of before when we're talking about these specific students in terms of instruction? Okay. So we are gonna go, we're gonna cross our fingers and hope that this works. Okay, so here we go. So we're gonna take this belief line. You guys are gonna hopefully use the annotate feature. I believe if you go up to, tell me what it looks like on your end. I believe if you go up to more, oops, we're gonna go back. Sorry, you should be able to do the annotate feature and there should be stamps. So I'm going to ask you for this for the first time we answer this question to use the heart. And you're going to kind of put where you are on the line. So I'm going to show one of the rights that's listed in the Literacy Bill of Rights. And I want you to kind of say, I disagree is kind of a negative one, but so kind of agree, neutral or unsure, and then disagree when we're thinking about our students with the most significant disabilities. So we're talking about all students have the right to an opportunity to learn to read and write. So if you're able to take your, thank you guys, Maddie, Nicole, you guys are doing an awesome job. Put your heart where you think, where you're feeling like that goes. And then we're gonna answer that question a second time. We're gonna use the star. You guys can take a second. If anybody needs any help finding the annotate feature, let me know. Elizabeth, do you have a question?
No, I was sorry. I was trying to click the heart. I clicked a hand.
No worries.
I don't know how to get it on there.
Sure. So you're in the reactions. So you need to go to the annotate menu. So like you can't see mine because you can't see my toolbar, but mine's on my toolbar. It looks like a little pen or a little pencil. And then
it's been a long time since I've used
I know,
Zoom.
right? Which isn't a bad thing, right? could be worse. We could all be really well versed in it right now. But hopefully if you click on that annotate, stamp is an option. And then under stamp, there's a heart.
Mine was at the top. It says like you are viewing Bridget Peterson's screen. And then it says view options with a drop down menu. And then it says annotate.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, I see it. It's at top. Thank you, Maddie.
Thank you. And could not see who was talking. So much appreciated to that person.
I was like, I'm on my iPad and I don't have the heart, but I drew it in. So
That's perfect.
The pen came in, but I don't have those.
That's perfect. You were flexible. You were, you used the tools available to you. Okay.
I can't figure it out, but
that's
agree.
okay.
I agree.
That's okay. So my question to you is, do your thoughts on this change if we're talking about students who are older? So if we're talking about students who are 14, 15, 16, some of those older years, do you still think that this statement holds true, or do your thoughts change in that you feel like it's not as important a part of their academic career or their school career? And if you have a different thought about that, if you could take the star stamp, or you can draw it. If you're I'd be really impressed if somebody draws a star, and just maybe put the star stamp if it changes at all. All right, awesome. So glad that everybody agrees. For me, this one is really important. I think that all students have that right. I taught first and second grade self-contained students with low incidence disability. So my district had, we had like 3 levels of multi-needs basically. And so I taught all 3 of them at some point, but I taught first and second grade, kind of our higher low incidence, if that makes any sense, for the most years. And so my kind of philosophy was I ran a classroom that was very similar to the first grade classroom across the hall. And my theory was if there were things that other first graders still needed support with in terms of, independent living skills, things like that, that if those are things that we don't expect a typical 6-year-old to be able to do, then we didn't necessarily work on them in my classroom. So we didn't do a lot of, we didn't do cooking, we didn't do teeth brushing or things like that, because I kind of figured their parents could still work on those things, and we would get to points in the future where if parents still needed support in that, where other students were transitioning to maybe be able to do it by themselves, then that's when the school would kind of come in and support. And obviously if a parent reached out and said, we're really struggling with fill in the blank, we would obviously help with that. But for the most part, we really tried to stick to this. That wasn't necessarily the belief of all the people that I taught with. So like I said, we had kind of 3 levels. And so in the school that I taught in, we had 8 different classrooms of students who we call them CDC and SCDC. And so we had 8 different classrooms of students who kind of fell into those categories. And so different teachers kind of had different philosophies and ran things very differently. There wasn't a lot of cohesion between what we were doing. And so we started to kind of move toward more cohesion, toward the end of when I was in the classroom, but it was a lot of just each person kind of did their own thing. So I like that we're all able to be here and all able to listen to these things together, so that we can hopefully someday in the future all be on a more cohesive or same page for how we're providing support to our students. So I'm going to clear the annotations, and then we're going to move to the next. Hopefully we're going to move to the next slide. So the next slide. Here. So on this one, we're going to do the same thing. So we're just going to do about these 2. So all students have the right to lifelong educational opportunities, incorporating literacy instruction and use. So go ahead and use your heart and kind of put where you are on that line. Wonderful. So I think one thing that's always important to remember is it's always going to take our students, the students that we're talking about today, it's going to take them longer. It's going to take them more repetition. One of the strategies that they talk about in the book is repetition with variety. So we have to provide them lots of repetitions using a variety of materials, a variety of books and things like that to be able to practice the skills that we want them to do. So while their general education peers are, we kind of switch from that learning to read to reading to learn late, kind of late elementary school, but for sure by middle school, our students are still going to require that direct instruction because it does take them longer. We have some students who, when they're younger, they've had medical trauma and things like that, where they maybe weren't ready to be able to learn, they weren't coming to us well enough to be able to learn these things. And now that they're older and things have maybe evened out. Sometimes we see puberty as a good thing for some of those things. Now they're in a space where they're ready for that instruction. And so they should be able to receive those supports, even though, it's not necessarily, learning to read is not necessarily a typical skill for their peers and things like that. So just thinking about those types of things. All right, so I'm going to clear my annotations here. So one thing I just want to talk about, and I feel like when I started teaching in 2005. I feel like we talked a lot about this idea of presumed competence. And I feel like it got us in a little bit of a trap, because I think what some people took that to mean is they already know how to do it. So we should presume that they know these things like their peers know. So we should assume that a child going to kindergarten maybe already knows the ABCs and what they are, right? Because that's what typical children typically know, right? They maybe can't identify them all, but most of them can probably sing the ABCs or close enough, right? And I think this idea of presumed competence put us into a trap where we wanted to assume that kids already had that knowledge. And I like the phrase presumed potential better, because I think it puts the onus back on us as the teachers to say they have the potential to learn it if we teach them. Again, we go back to that idea that if we don't teach it, our students are unlikely to learn it just kind of being in the environmental milieu, right? They're going to need that direct instruction. They're going to need that repeated practice. And so if we teach it, they can learn it. But just assuming that they know it because they've been part of a blended EC program or, have done daycare in the community or things like that is probably an unsafe assumption, because we're assuming that students have skills that we maybe haven't directly taught them or taught them in a way that's accessible to them. So that's just one thing I like to point out, because I think that I'm even thinking of some students that we had in the district where I feel like we kind of fell in a trap where parents too want to say, like, we should presume that they're competent, and we should, but they're competent to receive instruction, not that they just know these things through, just being part of their school community and things like that. Anybody have any thoughts about presumed competence versus presumed potential? So how do we know if students should receive emergent or conventional literacy instruction? So that's a kind of middle portion of our PD today. We're going to go over the specific instructional routines that fall under each. So if you have students who are emergent readers, these are the routines that they recommend that you do. I mean, they push daily, but they talk about what to do if there isn't time daily, right? Because we are talking about students who have a lot of related services. We are doing things like personal care, toileting, and things like that. So our day gets much shorter than maybe some of their peers, just by being eaten away by some of those things. And so we'll talk about that a little bit, but when we're looking at our students, how do we determine which path we're going down, right? So are we going down the emergent path, or are we going to go down a conventional path? And so we're going to look at these 4 questions, and we're going to answer them for all 4 questions for every student that's in our room. And the questions are, does the student know most of the letters most of the time? And so now notice that doesn't say with 80% accuracy over 4 trials, right? Our favorite IP goal, right? But just a general, do they know most of the letters most of the time? And you can continue to reinforce those letter names and sounds as you continue on with the conventional routines. Do they engage actively in shared reading? And what that means is they are excited to read the books that you're presenting to them in a shared reading format. We'll talk about what that looks like. And not that they are just willing to participate because you said first shared reading, then iPad, right? So they're willing to kind of engage for a means to a more preferred activity, but that they're actively part of the activity. And again, we'll talk about a little bit about what that looks like. They have a means of communication and interaction. So again, that's where our speech paths and hopefully me are able to support you through that use of AAC. So we want to see students using a robust AAC system. And one of the components of a robust AAC system is access to the alphabet. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm not going to focus on that as much today, but know that if you need any support with AAC, you can always reach out to me. And then the last one is understand that writing involves letters and words. So students understand that, letters go together to make different words, different groups of letters make different words, and that those words go together to make sentences, sentences go together to make writing, and things like that. And we're going to talk about different strategies that we have to help teach that, right? And I'm going to tell you what I think is the biggest bang for your buck if you have students who don't have that knowledge or understanding right now. So once we've answered these questions, if we say no to any of them, even just one, students would benefit from participating in the emergent literacy routines. And there are 6 of them. And then if you answer yes to all 4, your students would benefit from participating in daily conventional literacy routines, of which there are 5. I'm not going to go over it today, only because I don't think that we'll have time, but there is kind of a setup that Eriskson and Koppenhaver propose when you have a class that's blended, right? So when you have a class that is made up of some emergent learners and some conventional learners, kind of how do you take these routines? Some of them overlap, so that's great. Some of them are the same in both, but some of them are different. So they would say you're going to do this activity, but you're going to focus on this for the emergent students and this for the conventional, or you're going to do this emergent routine, but your conventional learners are only going to participate in this part of it, and then they're going to go do something else. So just ways to do that. And again, we're not going to talk about that today. So if that's something that you're interested in talking about more, you can always reach out to me or coach, and I can give you some more information on that. Okay, so I know that your classes aren't going to be very beautifully drawn by this line. They're all emergent or they're all conventional, but we are going to talk about them separately today. So this is just one thing I wanted to share. So the very last chapter has a variety of frequently asked questions at the end. And this question is one that really speaks to me as a teacher, and I think is kind of this conundrum that we get stuck in for our students, is how do we decide between functional skills and academic skills, and what does that line look like, and does that line change over time, right? Like what it looks like in first grade maybe isn't what it looks like in ninth grade, but why would we choose to teach this over functional skills? And the answer to this is something that, like, as I was reading it the first time, I was like, yes, this is what I've been saying for so long. But we should teach literacy because it is the most functional skill your students can acquire. Again, we are equating literacy and communication, and we know that for students who are working on transition goals, self-determination is one of the evidence-based practices that we use to help students meet their post-secondary goals and things like that. To be able to self-determine, you need to be able to communicate. And so if we're not really focusing on that as a skill, that's where they're not going to be able to participate in their transition planning and in their post-school planning in the same way. So while we're spending years working up to hopefully them being able to be an important part of that planning for their family, for the school. We all know that Illinois is kind of bleak and abysmal in terms of adult services. So being able to help them be part of that decision making, I think, is something that's really important. Our students are also, a lot of our students are always going to be dependent on adults for support. Some of our students are going to be dependent on adults for all personal care, right? They're going to be dependent on adults for meals, for personal hygiene, things like that. They need to be able to direct those people to, if something is being done incorrectly, if something is hurting them, they need to be able to have those communication skills to do that. And so that's another way that the literacy and communication piece really drive their ability to participate in their own life. So if you don't have a way to say, I don't like this, you might get broccoli on your plate for dinner every night for the rest of your life. And if you really hate broccoli, then that's a problem. There's a great video. I do not have it in the presentation today, but it is of a young man explaining to his speech therapist that he is not being fed by the person who works in his group home in the evenings. The person doesn't seem to enjoy him very much. And so he is not providing him dinner. And he is explaining that to his speech therapist, who then is able to rectify the problem and also call, the appropriate authorities, because we're obviously not going to do that. But without that ability to communicate, that person might continue to go not receiving their evening meal until there's a shift change, or that person moves or moves on to a different job or things like that. And then they're moving on to another job. And what are they doing there, right? So we want to be able to do that. So literacy is functional, and literacy can help students also learn the skills that have traditionally been placed on the other side of an imaginary line. So whether you agree or disagree, it's just something to think about. I think it's important, obviously, or I wouldn't have read this book 5 times now and be teaching the class. So I just wanted to share that. So we're going to go into a break. And what we're going to do is you're going to have a time. I'm going to have about a 15 minutes timer up for you. This is a Padlet. So and I'll share the slides with everybody. I'll put the link in the chat. And I want you to go to the Padlet. I have it set up to be anonymous, so no one can see, who wrote it. And I want you to put what concerns you have. So knowing the students that you're working with right now, knowing the students that you've maybe had in the past or you expect to have, some of us are kind of getting that inkling for who's coming to us next year. What concerns do you have in terms of teaching literacy to our students? So I want you to take a minute and think about that. So we'll take the break time. I know we just took break, but we'll take the break time to kind of fill out the Padlet, if you will, and then you can take a little bit of time, and then we'll come back together and maybe look at that just a little bit, and then move on to the specific routines. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions before we?
Bridget, can you copy and paste the link for the Padlet into the chat? Thank you.
Yes, I will. Oops, sorry. Anybody else have any other thoughts?
The only thing I was going to share is that especially at like well, I think at all levels, but our students that are non-communicators, that's like one of the biggest things that we hear that they are concerned about is like if they're taking transportation or their school, like that the student can't come home and tell them if something bad happened to them, right? And so how do we always ensure like the safety of our students that don't have that like robust communication or, you know, opportunity? Like how do we give them that opportunity so that parents can feel more confident?
And we know that, I mean, sadly, we know that the abuse statistics for people who have disabilities, but also people who are non-speaking are a bit, they're terrifying. And so parents have every right to be scared of those things that Colleen's talking about. So we're hoping to give them the tools to be able to do that. Now, you might have had an AAC device for 3 years and not be a proficient communicator. That's okay. You know, we're not really going to talk about language development through AAC today because it's just not the focus of the presentation, but it takes adults who are, you know, have an acquired disability who are now using AAC years to be proficient, and they already were proficient verbal communicators. So adults who have ALS and have to, you know, no longer have access to speech, you know, they say 7 years for an adult, you know, and I have 4-month-old nieces. I mean, I talk to them all the time. They don't say one thing to me. They might look at me, they might smile, they might right now make like kind of a vowel sound, right? But we're still continuing to provide that input. So just something to think about. All right, so I'm going to go into this one. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time to fill out the Padlet and just take a moment. It's about 11:30, so if you want to grab some lunch or things like that, then we'll continue with the specific strategies for emergent conventional learners.
Hey, Bridget, sorry, do you mind also dropping the presentation in the link?
Yeah.
I might have missed it.
No, you're fine. That's what I was just going to do. All right. Thanks, guys. We're gonna come back together. I'm glad Anna's daughter appreciated my musical selection for the timer. I'm gonna keep everybody cool, calm, and collected. We get to be at home today, which is really nice. So I hope everybody had a chance to grab a snack or some lunch so we can make it through to 1:30. So thank you so much for your really great reflections on your hesitations or concerns. I do this exact activity during the first session of my class, and I usually get really short answers, but you guys have really great things written here. I know they're anonymous, but I'm still really excited to sit down and read through all of them. If kind of after the end of today, if, I mean, I don't know that I'll be able to necessarily specifically answer any, all of these questions, but if there's still something that's like lingering that you're thinking about, please feel free to reach out. Like, I am more than happy to come and do anything to help you get started, or like I said, like dip your toe in, things like that. So I think a lot of this goes to collaboration time, which is just so hard, right? We're all so busy and we're all pulled in a lot of directions. I've been having some conversations with some of our OTs about how do we get this information to them. You know, they work for SACID, not for us. So did a little bit of brainstorming on how we could, get some of this information to them. Because when we talk about writing a little bit later, we're going to talk about handwriting and written expression and how they're two different things, right? And so just to make sure we're all kind of working from that same knowledge base is going to be really important, especially because we do have a lot of shared goals. You know, I've obviously been in a lot of IP meetings with a lot of you, we might have a shared goal between an OT and a teacher. We might have a shared goal between a speech path and a teacher. So how do we find that time to collaborate? And so I think it's like, being creative, but also I think building that relationship with people on the team, because I think the better that relationship is, the easier you're able to do some of those collaboration things. And hopefully you get to a point, right, if you've worked together for a while, where things kind of work really organically and naturally. I was lucky enough to have the same assistant, kind of lead assistant, if you will, for 7 years. And so by the end, like, she really knew what was going on, but it took a lot of time because we never had any time together. Our assistants rode the buses for some extra money. So she came on the bus with the kids and she left on the bus with the kids. So it was just sometimes trying to find, like, what can we give the kids to do that we know they don't need any help, so she and I can talk and make sure we're on the same page. So I think that's one great thing there. And then just also, how do we balance it, right? Like, what we're going to talk about today is a lot. And so know that I don't think that anyone's starting on Tuesday with, all of these strategies. And we'll talk a little bit about what Eriskson and Koppenhaver recommend in terms of, if you don't have enough minutes in the day to do all of the things, right? Kind of what that looks like. So there's another one here that I just want to say, I want to point out, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it again, but it said, do I have the knowledge to be able to do this? And I think that's so worth acknowledging, because we do not leave our undergrad preparation programs ready to do this. So when I took over the classroom that I taught for the most amount of time, which was a first and second grade classroom, I knew that I needed to be teaching reading. I did not know what to do. I had no ideas. And even after reading this book, what I did, I'm going to share a lot today. Oh, did that. That was terrible. Not the right things to do. And so how do we make sure that we have that, that knowledge? And so hopefully by learning together and kind of building this learning community, we can hopefully prepare ourselves to be able to do that. But I think that's such a great thing to acknowledge, that we are not leaving undergrad with the information to do this. And I mean, I taught in the classroom for 8 years. I didn't have this information, right? I knew I needed something, and some things I'm like, oh, I kind of did that. But the information that's laid out in this book, I feel like it would have given me so much more confidence to do in the classroom. So if you're interested, we'll talk about the class at the end, but if you're interested in the class, or like Colleen said, interested in the book, definitely. The book's an easy read. Like, I know it's like a textbook, but it's not bad. I promise. It's not bad. So these are great. Thank you. Anybody have anything they want to share, vulnerable and share in terms of hesitations or concerns, before we dive into the routines?
Hey, Bridget.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of mine, I just typed about how like I always worry about the students that are struggling the most. How can I best support them? Is it a behavior in terms of they just like don't want to engage in the learning, or is it just a clear lack of comprehension? Like I want to make sure I'm able to provide those interventions sooner rather than later, or like meaningful conversations. So I worry about that a lot.
Right. I think too, a lot of what they talk about in the book, and they do talk about a lot of older students and even like adults. I mean, in the book, they talk about, like a 55-year-old man that this is something he really wanted to learn how to do and never did it. So he, was working with people, is that idea of choice. So are we looking at, what are these students interested in? And if we're trying to engage them in those activities, how are we pulling materials that are engaging for them? And that's hard, right? Especially when we have like curriculum to follow, a wide range of students who might have a very, wide ranging things, but especially, we get students who are really narrow, they really love trains, or they really love license plates, or they really love whatever. So, Justin Bieber, how do we take that and harness it a little bit to hopefully get over the hump? And so that's maybe a longer conversation, but I think a really good point, especially because you have the high school students. So how do we make sure that they're engaged? But to be able to be part of the learning is a great point. Anybody have anything else? Thanks, Megan.
Yeah, I'll just add one quick thing there. I've done this a lot more with younger students and elementary school students, but I didn't realize the length we were really going for. So I apologize for the novel that I posted. I wasn't looking at everybody else's popping up, and I put mine up last. But what I had in there though was just kind of really focusing on those student interests, and I found it like pretty quick and easy to be able to do this. But if I have a student that really likes Steve Harvey, so I created a book that it was a social story essentially that was going over the bus rules for him, but it was Steve Harvey, and it was a picture of him like sitting in a chair and telling him what the bus rules were and everything like that. So he like really loves that book and enjoys it. And then in there too, I have a bunch of the super simple songs videos, definitely younger kids again. So high school probably not so much, but the super simple song videos, I went in and screenshotted and just made them into books with the audio or whatever the words were that they were saying. And what I found with those, especially with more severe disabilities as well, if the student likes the video, they're going to look at it and be like, oh, wait, that's my favorite video on a page. So at least their eyes then are on what you're trying to teach to them, because that was one of my biggest concerns with nonverbal students and students who are going to have lower attention spans. How do you keep them focused on what you're trying to teach them? And then it comes into whether or not, if their eyes are there, are they really focused on it? But just getting those eyes there is like that first part that I'm trying to work on.
Absolutely. I think that's such a great point. I love the idea of taking a YouTube video and turning it into a book. I never have thought to do that. So I really like that idea. And those super simple songs are great because they're really simple. There's not a lot of like, you know what I mean? Like it's simple audio, it's simple. It's a great resource. There's also like if you do have older students and you want to incorporate music, there's lists, there's all kinds of lists of like songs you can use for core words and things like that. So, or activities where you're listening to the songs and then kind of putting together some of the lyrics using the core words. And so just great ways to incorporate kind of that multimodality too, like students who are really motivated by music or visuals or things like that. So I think that's a great point, Zach, and no worries for a long answer. Like I said, I'm so impressed with everyone's reflection here. So kudos to you guys for all of this on Institute Day, because I always feel like it's long.
I'm just not used to being the long answer, so I felt like I had to say something.
That's okay. No worries. All right. So we are going to dive fast and furious into the different strategies. So I'm to try to fit this all in. It's probably going to be fast. So again, please stop me if you need to have a question. I have a couple of teachers who have graciously agreed to like pop in for some of the strategies that they have tried in their classroom. So I'm really excited for them to be able to share with you the things that they've tried. Oh, and there we go. Okay. So emergent literacy routines. So these are the 6 emergent literacy routines that you would be focusing on for students who, again, were answering no to at least one of those 4 questions, knows most of the letters most of the time, actively engages in shared reading, has a means of communication and interaction, and understands that letters make up words, right? letters go together to make up words. So symbol-based communication. So we're looking at a robust AAC system that students have access to and are actively learning. So it's not saying that you have to be proficient, but that we've identified that you need more support in communication. And this is how we're going to do it, right? So the other thing I always want us to think about, and we'll talk about this in just a second, but is their verbal language functional for what we're asking them to do, right? So we have lots of students who might say 1, 2, 3 words and are maybe intelligible, maybe not. Their vocabulary might be very simple, but is that enough to participate in the academic tasks that we're asking them to do? Sometimes the answer might be yes, but I would say more often than not, the answer is no. So think about 2-word phrases, speech pass. If I'm wrong, yell at me, but it's like 2, like 18 months to 2 years. So if we couldn't drop a 2-year-old into a kindergarten classroom or a first grade classroom and expect them to be, proficiently communicating within that classroom, then we need to provide more for our students. So just something to think about. Shared reading. So we're going to talk about that. And I don't have Dottie or Amy on deck for that, but if they want to just jump in with anything when we talk about that, they have graciously allowed me to help them get some of that started. It's been awesome. We're going to talk about predictable chart writing, alphabet knowledge and phonological awareness, independent writing with access to the full alphabet, and then self-selected reading. So we're again, like I said, today I'm not really going to hit much on the AAC piece because I have so many resources that I can share with you in terms of that. But all students are going to require a means of communication to participate in literacy activities because speaking is integral to be part of those. We're talking about books. We should be asking questions. We want them to be commenting on things. There's a wide range of communicative functions that just general language development has, and we can work on those within the structure of some of these literacy activities. So a lot of our students are on touch chat. And so the nice thing about that is we do have some consistency between staff, right? Especially for our support staff, our PSRPs who might bounce around a little bit. We know everyone's not always in the same place, especially this year, Lincoln and Edison and, some of the paraprofessionals that are supporting in multi-needs maybe came from Lincoln and aren't familiar. So it's nice when we have a little bit of consistency there. I think that's really helpful. So I have some links here. You're going to see at the end of each section, there's going to be like a resources slide that just has some links to some resources for that specific strategy. So like I said, today we're not really going to talk much about AAC, but know that there's lots of resources out there. So there's Project Core, which is again through UNC Chapel Hill Center for Literacy and Disability Studies. And they are kind of our like landing spot for all the emergent routines and supports that we're going to talk about today. They have a lot of professional development. They have some reflection forums. They have classroom observation forums that, if you were observing each other or you have an administrator who's observing you to kind of give yourself some feedback on how things are going. DLM. So when we get into the conventional routines a little bit later, they all of the professional development modules that relate to the strategies we're going to talk about are housed on DLM. So our students take that assessment. I know we're not looking at that data today, but teaching these routines and teaching these strategies is helping them to be able to better participate in that assessment, right? Are they going to still know the answers? Maybe not for everything, but they're going to have a better idea of what's being asked of them in the assessment. Because I've done the DLM myself. I started back in the day when we did the binders. Raise your hand if you did that. And so we've all done it and said, this is ridiculous, right? We've all been there. But I think this would give us a good foundation to making sure that when we're working on that assessment, we're not feeling quite so much like fish out of water. The language stealers video is just a video that's talking about core language versus nouns and fringe. And then there's a video on aided language stimulation, core words, and then why literacy is critical in AAC is the whole video for the Erickson little part that I played earlier. It's about an hour. Feel free to just like stick it on. You could listen to it kind of like a podcast. You don't really need to see her. She doesn't show anything or it's just her talking. So you could easily listen to it as kind of a podcast type thing. And I have lots of podcast resources at the end if you're a podcast fan. So we'll talk about that. Okay. So now we're going to get into some of the specific strategies. So symbol-based communication is going to be over the whole day, right? We're not only going to teach it in this one specific strategy time, but shared reading is something that we're specifically going to carve out time for. And then we're going to move on to another strategy that's also going to incorporate symbol-based communication. But just know that's kind of overarching as opposed to a specific time within the day. So what shared reading is, it's a teacher and a student working through a book together. So you're working to develop the students' literacy and interaction skills through that shared reading. It's really focused on the interaction between the reader and the listener. It's not so much focused on comprehension. It's not focused on getting to the end of the book, right? Sometimes we might choose a really, like, you might have a student who would love to read Dragons Love Tacos, but they can't make it through the whole book, right? So maybe they only are going to get through a couple of pages. You're going to do, there's like strategies for each page. You're going to do that. And then when they're starting to wane, you're just going to stop and move to the next thing. Can be done individually or with a small group. And really what we're doing here is really trying to develop and support that emerging communication. So our students who are emergent readers are likely also emergent communicators. That's not always true, but I would say very likely. And so the structures that we're doing here are meant to support communication and that communication development. So you're going to follow what's called the CAR strategy. So while you're reading, you're going to facilitate this strategy on every page. And so what you're going to do is you're going to read the page of the book, and then you lead with a comment, and then you're going to kind of pause. So really important to wait that time and give the student time to think about what you said, potentially respond on their device. I always like to say when I do my AAC, for some of you have probably heard me say it before, but like if you weren't uncomfortable, you didn't pause long enough. The pauses feel terrible. They feel really awkward. But really kind of giving them that space is really important. So you're going to say a comment. So if you read something about, Dragons Love Tacos, your comment might be, I love to eat tacos for dinner. And then you're just going to be quiet. And then you're going to maybe say to the student, if the student responds, then you're going to respond to the student and maybe add something to what they said. So maybe they say, like, you say, oh, you like tacos too, right? Something like that. And if they don't, you might say, what do you see in this picture? Or tell me more about what you see. So you're not asking a closed question. There's not one answer, but you're inviting them to try and talk about the page that you're reading about. And then if they do comment or say anything, you're going to attribute meaning to that, and you're going to add a little bit more to it. So if they say one word, you're hopefully going to add one word more, so that they're continuing to see how they might comment or talk about a book. So you're going to respond to every communication attempt, which means sometimes it might be on the device. Sometimes it might be, like Zach said, visual attention to the book. It might be students who maybe have other physical responses like flapping or, other, like students with cerebral palsy might have like an ATNR response, things like that. You're going to try to help them see how those things are communicating things, and then help them see how they might communicate the same thing using that communication device. So like, oh, I see your eyes looking at the page. You're looking at this, the dragon eating the taco right here. You like tacos, right? Or I think you are telling me you like tacos, or you want tacos for lunch, something like that. So you're going to do that. So this is kind of where you're going to start, especially for students who are emergent. So one of the things that in the multi-needs classrooms, Dottie wanted to really focus on this with some of her students, and also help support her paraprofessionals to be able to facilitate some of this, right? So something to kind of take off Dottie's plate. And so we took some books and made them. We took some off of Tar Heel Reader, which we'll talk about today, but and then we put comments in the corner for them so that the program assistants didn't have to think about those comments, but they're there for them. And then we kind of worked with them on how to facilitate that with the students. So I modeled with each student. We did short little professional developments for them in the morning, and then hoping to continue to just kind of coach and support them through trying to work with their students on that. So, and Dottie did a great job of identifying some books that we pulled that were really high student interest. So for example, I read with a student before Christmas and he just kept saying Christmas lights, Christmas lights, Christmas lights, which was not, we were reading a book about dogs. So then Dottie went and made him a book about Christmas, and then we were able to use some of the things in that page and kind of expand on that. So again, taking that student interest and building off it. So it was a really great experience to see, that then the student was really engaged in saying some other words besides just, the Christmas vocabulary that they were really interested in. Once the students are really proficient with that CAR strategy, so you have students who are actively engaging with you, they're responding, then you're going to do what's called putting the crowd in the car. So then you're going to take what you're doing and kind of expand it a little bit. So you would do, you can do a completion, which is where you leave a blank at the end of a sentence and students fill it in. Typically you would do this in books with like repetitive phrases or lines. So brown bear, what do you? And then you kind of leave it there and then they would fill it in. So again, now we're getting to some things that have one answer, right? At the beginning of that CAR strategy, we're asking really open-ended questions. And now we're getting into things where there maybe is like a right or a wrong answer. You can do recall, so asking students questions about what just happened in the book. Open-ended questions, so tell me what's happening in this picture. WH questions, so what does the man have? And then distance questions. So for those, we're building a bridge between the book and personal experience. So there were farm animals in the book. What farm animals did you see, on our field trip or something like that? So again, this is moving much higher. If you have students who haven't really engaged with the strategy much before, we really want to stick with that CAR strategy till they're really feeling comfortable with it, and also till we're really feeling comfortable with it. If it's not something that feels like authentic to you or natural, then just kind of continue to practice it there. So I have lots of resources for shared reading here. So I'm going to show you, just click on a couple of them really quick. I'm not going to click on all of them. But Tar Heel Shared Reader, again, comes out of UNC Chapel Hill, the Tar Heels. They have, it's kind of like a library of books online that are specific. They're created for students. So students can also create them. My old district would never give me access to it because the tech director would say, but some of the words are spelled wrong. And I'm like, that's because kids wrote the book, dude. Like, don't worry about it. I won't show that one, but he didn't want to do it. And so what they've done is taken some of their books and put together comments. They also have fringe vocabulary on them here. So for example, and then you can search. So if you have a student who really likes something, if you have a student who really likes Justin Bieber or Taylor Swift, I think there's even like a Taylor Swift ABC book. So just a great way, again, to do that engagement. But so like here, I like strawberries. I'm going to click on it. And then here's your comment. What is she doing? So what is this girl doing? I wonder what she's doing, right? And then we can go to our next. I'm sorry, there's like too many things on my screen. We can go to the next one. I like strawberries. Do you like them? So it already gives you your comments here. They also have fringe vocabulary at the bottom that you can, or I'm sorry, core vocabulary at the bottom that you can use to, so like is here, you can point to like when you say it. So you can model, but you can also use their device. A lot of the strategies that Project Core and UNC Chapel Hill have put in place are for like districts that really don't, we are so lucky for the amount of resources we have, but they're also really trying to put together curated resources for districts that don't have the funds to be able to have access to a lot of the things that we do. So just note that. So again, they have, you can Google anything or kind of search anything you want on here, lots of options. They also have like a professional development site just about shared reading. So how do I get started? There's these professional development modules. You can do them either as a group, so like with someone else facilitating, or you can do it yourself as kind of a self-paced online. They're very short. I would say the longest one is maybe 20 minutes. So that's the really nice part about them. They're short and sweet. The girl talks really slowly, so you can speed her up quite a bit. And she still sounds pretty normal. So we did find that when we were doing some of the things with the PSRP staff in Dottie's room, we could speed her up a little and it was okay. So we've got shared reading, follow the car, print referencing. So not really going to get into that today, but, using this opportunity to talk about, letters, words, spaces, punctuation, capitalization, things like that. So using this opportunity to reference the print and help identify things that we're building towards, the understanding that letters make up words. Putting the crowd in the car and then kind of putting it all together, right? So those are some great things that are there as well. We've also got Project Core has some shared reading modules that are a little bit different. They have a self-reflection form. Down here, we've got Unite for Literacy, which are some online books that are all free. No sign in, so I shouldn't be collecting any student data. There's this GIF alphabet book. So there's a GIF on every slide for each letter of the alphabet. So lots of things here to be able to look at. So feel free to peruse through. If you have any questions about them, you can just let me know. So we're going to talk about predictable chart writing, and Dottie has graciously offered to just kind of talk a little bit. And this picture that you see is from her class. So Dottie, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. So I just also want to say, like, if you want help with shared reading, I mean, Bridget was amazing. She's put together a template. We've kind of put together like a core board for every book. So just to kind of help guide our paras, and it's been really nice and it's been very receptive with the paras. So that's my little plug for her helping with that.
Thank you.
But the predictable chart writing, I have to say, was something I started before I took Bridget's class and read the book. Last year, I was looking for help, wanted to use the old Clicker app, which is no longer really there. And so we were talking about this and she was like, well, what do you want? I'm like, I want them to start to understand how to build a sentence and how to write a sentence and just some of those print concepts. So we started with this. She introduced me to this and I love it. When I switched positions this year, it was the first structure I had up and running the first week of school. And it's super easy to do. So I highly recommend, if you want to dip your toes into something, this is a great way to start. It's something you can use, I feel like, with any level and on any topic. If you're a content, teaching something on a content, like you're talking about, I don't know, polar bears, you can, create something just on polar bears. So it doesn't have to be, it's not taxing, because my brain is always taxed. So to figure out what I wanted to write about this week, it's super easy. The first thing that we do is we create our chart. So on Mondays. So sometimes, depending upon the topic, I will build some background on it, maybe the previous week, or it's based on the topic that we've been learning about using our unique curriculum. So kind of different things. This week we did all about winter, and because we only had 2 days last week, I just really spent our writing time talking about winter. We made a word wall about winter, different pictures, and this way the kids really kind of had some background on it. So the first thing we do, is we develop the chart. So we come up with the title, we write the chart, and I start with a sentence stem. I don't know, Bridget, if you want to go into the next slide, and maybe I'll go into more details. I don't know what works better.
This is a great chart that Dottie put together that outlines each individual day. It's awesome. And so you can go through here and look at it, and she'll talk about it in a second, but it's a really great resource.
So on the first day, we developed that chart. And so I put together the sentence stem, and this week it was winter is. And so the kids are choosing, and for some kids that, they're using their devices to come up with what they want to say. Some kids can respond orally, and some kids, I'm just giving them two choices right now, because that's where we are. And so winter is snowy or winter is cold, that was kind of, for a couple of kids. So I can differentiate it very easily for every student in the class. And then everyone gives a response, and we put the chart together, and then we read the chart together as a group. And then the next day we're working with the chart. And that was kind of where you saw the underlining in my photo, is we had started working with the chart. I will pick out 2 print concepts that I want to talk about each week. So a lot of the time in my class is usually it's the core word or the sight word that we're working on for that week. And usually like it's a capital letter or what the sound is. So this way it was like, this week it was what letter makes the W sound, because we were doing W. So connecting that, or it's like the period at the end of the sentence, what goes at the end of the sentence, and finding that. So we go through, we start with reading the chart again. And I'll usually choose a different student every day to come up and work on pointing, and I'll kind of help guide as we're pointing and reading the chart, just to kind of get that left to right correspondence as well. And then we're selecting those elements, and I'm highlighting it or putting a box around them, putting a period, things like that. So on Wednesday, we're reading that chart again. We're always reading the chart. And then we start with sentence strips. So this is probably the most time consuming piece of the whole thing, is coming up with, you just have to take the student sentences and write them onto sentence strips, 2 per student. And what they're doing then is they're going to be snipping between the words. You want them to cut up one of the sentence strips. And if they cut between the words, don't worry about it, or between the letters of one word, don't worry about it, because that's your teaching time. You're like, oh, look, this doesn't, you cut between the M or the N and the T. Is this the whole word? And, kind of just teaching that letters make words going together, and you're just showing them, you're taping it together and you're redoing it. And then they are working on sequencing and matching the words to the full sentence strip. And in some cases, like last year, my class was a little bit different, and I was able to, with some students, kind of pull away that model of the sentence strip, and then they were able to still then work on sequencing and putting those together. So again, very easy to differentiate to the different levels of students.
Daddy, can I just ask a question?
Yep.
Are you doing this with all the students in your classroom?
Yes, my entire class. Yep.
Okay. And so I guess maybe the question, so when you talk about differentiating, when I'm thinking about like some of your students that are more involved, right? Like, are you using like hand over hand for them? Like for this part of it, just like, I guess going back to the part that Bridget talked about, like this is for all students and no student is to anything to participate in like the concept of print or literacy instruction. And so do you mind sharing like some of the things that you like tailor for certain students?
Sure. So for a couple of students, one of the things I have done is put every word in a different color on that sentence strip. And then they're kind of working on matching, and gives that visual attention and helps with that. Other kids, it is kind of that hand over hand, or kind of like guidance at the elbow to kind of move that piece. The different scissors are differentiated. Like that's another piece that, we differentiate, is how, what tools they're using to cut them. That's for that piece. I think for the other pieces, it's like Monday when we're making the sentence, one of the big things I differentiated is how they're making their selection. Like I said, for some kids, I'm just showing them 2 pictures and they're making their selection out of that, but they're participating, and they're participating in that concept of making a sentence. I'm trying to think about other differentiation things I've made.
Well,
So other kids, I've also like done the typing of the sentence when we get to later in the week. Amy, you were going to chime in because
I was just gonna add that, like, because Daddy's worked with me a lot with this. She's been like a great resource for me. So my kids are older and like working on more of those typing skills. So we will just like go in a Google Docs and type it out, and then kind of like teach them how to add their own image to make the book at the end. I know you didn't get to that part yet, but that's one thing that we're doing. And then also like one of my students who is not typing, we use a Jamboard. And so I have the words at the bottom in different colors, and he just has to put it in the correct order. So that's like one of the ways that like we're differentiating at the older level.
And those are some of the ways I differentiated it last year too. When they're making the book on Friday, the students are kind of taking, some kids are able to just remember that sentence, or if you repeat it orally and say, winter is cold, where's winter? Find find winter for me, and they find that word and they glue that word first. Other kids still need that model and they're still matching as we're gluing it down. And for other kids, I've typed it, we've used Jamboard. Some kids are handwriting them if they're able to. And last year with the up and back and forth of remote a lot, I used Google Slides for most of this, the making the book part. And some kids would type into the slide, and other kids, who were able to write, would write it. And we would just upload a picture of their writing. So we had the full book, then everybody's pages were together.
I was just gonna say too, I love so going back to some of the things that Bridget, you guys wrote on the Jamboard at the beginning about team goals, right? A lot of this would be a perfect time for occupational therapy to come in or speech to come in, right? To support within the classroom so that it's not always separate. So, we were talking, I saw a bunch of comments about how do we do this as a collaborative team and not make everything so different for students?
And that was something I did last year. I already had that time built in with the OT, and she came in on the Friday part every week and worked on that handwriting piece or and the visual perceptual pieces with some kids with sequencing those words. That's where we came up with the idea to do a different word in every color, because he knew the concept of being able to cut between, words, but he just really struggled to see it visually. The Thursday activity has probably been my biggest challenge all year. Just as my kids struggle to even sometimes just hold a paper, they struggle with. So the Thursday activity should be the sentence. And I think this is really great for a lot of kids. You're rereading the chart again every day. You're kind of going through and really modeling that left to right print concept and just rereading all of the sentences. Then you're choosing one or two sentences. And what I started with is putting a different word of the sentence on a whiteboard, and students were holding it. We were trying to put them, have the kids move around and get in order and look at the model of the sentence and see who goes first. That was really difficult with my class this year. So we tried different ways. We'd put all the sentences down, and then I would just have one student come up at a time and say, okay, the word is it going to go before winter or after winter? And then they would put it down. Something that has started to work since, I think probably since we got back from Thanksgiving, is I started giving the adults in the room the whiteboard, and then chose a student or two to move that adult to where they need to go in the sequence. And there's some kids who are, obviously more independent with that, and other kids, need more modeling and support. So that was the hardest part, to just figure out how to get my students to actively participate and accommodate for a lot of their gross motor, needs as well.
And I love that, because what first grader doesn't want to boss people around? I love that idea, Dottie.
Yeah. One in particular loves telling everyone where to go, where to stand. And then Friday, making the book. In my class this year, we're using the sentence strips and construction paper. And then I'm giving the students options of pictures that I've uploaded into Google Slides and say, okay, what picture do you think represents winter is snowy or winter is ice skating, and letting them select their picture. The kids who were typing last year, they were able to go into Google Images and find those, and we were uploading those images themselves. Several of the kids in my class love looking at these books during the class, when they are back in our little class library. I probably a stack of them, and they're just all bound together in a book. They absolutely love it. Last year, something else I did with them also, though, is at the end of the week, the students were reading and recording it into Seesaw. So then their parents were able to see that reading also and see what they were doing. So
I love the Seesaw connection too, because I love the stuff I would get from my kids on Seesaw, because it's the goofiest things, and I just love that introspective into what they're doing at school. So
I probably didn't go into all of the what predictable chart writing does, but there's just so many pieces, the concepts of print that you're working on, the spelling, the phonemic awareness, just so many things that as you're making the sentence and you're writing it, winter starts with what letter is that? And, helping me. And then like just having them help you build those, that sentence stem as you're doing it. So don't pre-write. That's the other thing is like, don't pre-write the sentence stem, like work with the students on doing it.
Thank you so much, Dottie. I think personally, I think this is the biggest bang for your, if you want to try one thing, or even if you want to try one day, right? You don't even have to do all 5 days, but even if you want to just, like Dottie said, dip your toe into one thing, I think this is the biggest bang for your buck. There's so much that can be incorporated into this, and it is so low prep. So like you're thinking of a sentence stem, and then you're not doing anything else until day 3 when all you're doing is writing on sentence strips. And that is something that you could like leave for your, your program support staff, your PSRPs to do when they come, or if they have a little bit of extra time at the end of the day. Or sometimes when they're at lunch with the kids, like they're just kind of sitting there, like they could write them out there too. So an easy way to do that. So just again, low prep, not a ton, but really such a good bang for your buck, I think. So if anybody's interested, even feel free to let Dottie know or me know or your coaches. It's just a great thing. If you're teaching content, so like I know Kelly Stoya is teaching a biology class, or if you still are, you were last semester. So like your title of your chart could be your vocabulary word. So I don't teach biology. Habitat, I don't know. And then your chart can be, it is about, and then you can talk about what is a habitat and talk about how do we talk about what that is. So just some different ways to incorporate it within content area and with older students as well. It could be, if you're doing a community trip and you're going to Culver's, it can be Culver's. And then it can be, I want cheese curds. I want a cheeseburger. I want a turtle sundae, whatever it is that you want. That obviously you all know my Culver's order, but that's what you can do it. And then toward the end of the week, you go to Culver's and order what you've talked about all week. So just lots of ways to incorporate it across the content areas that we're teaching as well, academic as well as, life skills, functional, things like that. So a great one.
Bridget, I just wanted to add in that, I agree. I was really hesitant. Writing's always been a struggle in my classroom and what to do. And I agree. I was really hesitant to get started on this, and Dottie really encouraged me. She's like, you have to do this. It's going to be great. And this is the most engaged my students have been during writing. They love it. They enjoy doing it. I even have one little guy that is younger than the rest of them, and he participates. He can't do it. He's doing it a little differently than them, but I have to say it's very successful, and I'm glad that I jumped into this. So thank you to Dottie for getting me started. I'm so glad
to hear that. Yes, thank you to Dottie. That's so fantastic. And I like Dottie said, I kind of roped her into it. She wanted an app that doesn't exist anymore. And I was like, let's just come meet with me, or let me come meet with you and tell me what you want. And then I'll try to find you an app. And then I was like, okay, so not an app, but I have a teaching strategy. Let's talk about it. So I roped her in, and she dove right in and tried it. So I'm so glad to hear that others are trying it as well. And it's been helpful. I have lots of resources here. Again, I'm not really going to click on any of them because Dottie's is a great resource that she made as well. But so there are, again, DLM and Project Core have short professional development modules on what this looks like. There's some different handouts here. There's a great blog post. This Practical AAC blog post is by an SLP who works on the South Side. She works for, I can't think of what the district is now, but she works in a high school on the South Side. And so the blog post is from her. And then she also has another blog post that talks about doing it virtually. I know we're not virtual, but gives some ideas of how to do it in a more, tech savvy way, if that's something that you think would be engaging for your students. So just a great way to do that there.
Two things, Bridget,
yes.
Do we have access to Dottie's predictable chart writing thing? Is it? If not,
you should, because I made a copy. You should be able to click on it on this slide. It should open. I made a copy of Dottie's, and this is a copy of it that I shared that should be shared with everybody. But if it's not, let me know and I'll fix it at the end.
Okay. And then the last thing is, Dottie, people are asking if there's any way you would be willing to have somebody videotape the different days of predictable chart writing. Is that something that you'd be willing to do if somebody came in and did it for you, taped it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I can do it for her. I'll make it pretty. Love it. Okay. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Okay. So one note about emergent writers. So we are going to talk about writing in a minute, but just another note is besides predictable chart writing, what else can we do to support writing for emergent learners is working on writing their name. So we're going to talk a little bit later about alternative pencils very shortly, but having students work on just writing their name. So, and some of them might be able to do it paper and pencil, but some of them might be doing it on a keyboard. Some of them might be doing it with like stamps or things like that. We can make it a variety of ways, but it's just another way to, work on those letters of their name, or, lots of kids know those first, right? They all, my letter, I have an August, my youngest is August, and, his letter is A, but his sister's letter is E or whatever. So, they pick up on those things first. So just another good thing to work on, and a great one. I know we don't have any EC people here today, but several, oh my God, my AirPod will not stand. But several of them have taken the class. And so this is something that they've kind of focused on as well, because it's something that they work on at EC. So that's great. Alphabet knowledge and phonological awareness. So we're going to work on a couple of things here. And one thing I'm going to talk about that I totally threw me off. So you don't have to raise your hand, but I'm going to raise my hand and tell you, I did a letter of the week and I hated it, but everyone said, like, you have to do a letter of the week. So I did. And the authors of the book recommend a letter of the day. So the reason that they recommend this is there are 36 weeks in a school year and 26 letters in the alphabet. So if you only do one letter a week, it takes you almost the entire school year to get through the alphabet, and you don't have time then to go back and do any of it again. So if you do a letter of the day, you can cycle through them. I think it's almost 7 times before the end of the year. And as students have letters that they know, you can drop them out. So they recommend taking them. I'm trying to think if I have. Oh yeah, sorry. You go through this 10 to 15 minute enhanced alphabet routine. And then I have a resource for you at the end that gives like 6 different orders that you can do them. So like first you can do it alphabetically, then you can do it, by frequency of use in the English language. Then you can do it by, whatever else is next. Like another one is, you take the letters of the kids' names and you do those first, and then you do what's left. So just different ways to cycle through it. And then every day you do this quick 10-minute routine. And then you're going to do things like reference it in your shared reading, talk about it in your predictable chart writing. So you're going to talk about it again throughout the day. And then the next day you're going to move to a new letter and do it again. Right? So you're going to talk about the uppercase and lowercase letter, show what it looks like, write it. You're going to practice naming the letter. So point to the letter, have the students say the name. We're going to talk about this again in a minute, but for students who are non-speaking, we're really going to help them try to develop that inner voice. So they maybe can't say it out loud, but you're really going to encourage them. Okay, we're going to all say it together. You say it in your head, right? So just trying to help them build that inner voice. You're going to practice saying the sounds, again, building that inner voice for students who can't say it out loud. Show students how to write the letter. This is one where I think we can really harness our OTs. So a lot of our OTs have like a little fun, like ditty that they say to help them remember how to build it, like, how to write the letter. And so we want to make sure that we're using that consistent language across. So if they're going to use some of the handwriting without tears, terminology or things like that, or they have another one that they like, just making sure that we're consistent with that. And then students are going to practice writing the letter, and they can either do that through traditional handwriting, tracing, but also using an alternative pencil, which is giving students access to an alphabet through keyboards or like a alphabet sheet or things like that. Okay. So this is a great little guide to teaching the letters and the letter sounds. It gives you an idea of how to kind of move through it. So for students who don't know any letters or only a few, you're going to focus on the letter names, start with high frequency letters that have like similar sounds. So like letters that say their sound, if that makes sense. Select important letters to target. If they know around half the letters, then she gives you strategies for what you're going to do if you know 80%. And then students who know most of them, how do we continue to build on that knowledge when they're in? So in the first book that I talked about, that's like the first edition, they had transitional and then conventional. In this one, there's only emergent and conventional. But so some of the resources you might see transitional as well. But so That's there as well. Great resource. Phonemic awareness. So phonemic awareness is the ability to manipulate sounds in spoken language. So one thing I always like to remind people is you can do it with your eyes closed. If you're looking at letters and manipulating them, moving them around, that's phonics. Phonemic awareness is all the manipulation of sound. And so again, we can do it with our eyes closed. We don't have to close our eyes, but we could close our eyes and do it. So you're going to model the skills and ask the students to manipulate the sound themselves. You're going to work on building that inner voice. And then they have shallow skills. There's obviously a lot of skills incorporated in phonemic awareness, but these are the ones that they pull out that they say are the most important, kind of where we should focus. And the shallow skills would be things like rhyming and alliteration. And our deeper skills are going to be things like blending and segmenting. So, pig, which, if any of you are doing some of the blast and things like that, you've been working on those with your students as well. So just some things to focus on. If we are doing this phonemic awareness and we have students who are non-speaking, we might use some visuals to support. So let's blend p-ig, what word? And then they're showing us the picture, right? So this isn't with your eyes closed, obviously, but the blending you could do with your eyes closed. So is this a dog, a cat, or a pig? P-ig. And what does that look like? So just different ways to do that. If anybody has access to Haggerty, which I believe we do, pre-K or EC kindergarten first, that's a great resource. There's a lot on every day, so you can probably prioritize what it is you want to do. You probably don't have to do all of it. Readtopia is a curriculum from Don Johnston that is built on all of the principles that we're going to talk about today. And so they have some free resources that are great. And so one of them is their learning letters resource. So again, they have 5 different sets of going through those letters. So in different order, and they give you set 1 and 2 are free on the website, which is really nice. Again, professional development modules, there's alphabet books on Tar Heel Reader. Lots of them are, you can find a train one, you can find Taylor Swift, things like that. And then Jane Farrell here, she is a teacher out of Australia, and she has some great resources on her website as well. And so she has the flow chart is what I showed before, the yellow one. And then she has some free emergent reading lesson resources, and she has the enhanced alphabet routine kind of pulled out and really structured for you if that's something you're interested in starting. Again, this is another like a letter of the day, easy way to kind of dip your toe in to it. So independent writing with access to the full alphabet. So for students who aren't going to be pencil and paper writers, we need to come up with other ways for them to have access to the full alphabet and right away, right? Like we're not waiting for some arbitrary time in the future when they've learned ABCD that then we give them access to it. So we can do that through a bunch of different ways. Every AAC device should have access to the full alphabet in it. If you have one that doesn't and you want it to, you can always let me know. If we have kids on a customized vocabulary, we can always build something for them. And then we can always look and see what's available kind of in the programs that they're in already. We have keyboards that can be connected to our iPads. I know earlier this year, Zach and I were looking at some things together, and we got him some external keyboards that you just plug and play, you just stick it into the lightning and then it goes. So you don't have to charge it. You don't have to do any of that futzy stuff. And it's an easy way to get it on there.
Yeah, Bridget, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. They actually were great when we ordered them. I was like, oh, this is nicer than I thought. And then you might have some students who can't access a keyboard. They can't access their communication device through direct selection, through touching with their finger. And then that's where you might have something like an alphabet flip chart where we're going to kind of list through the letters and have them choose one. I don't know if you can really see in the picture here, but you'll see there's just random letters written here. So this child is working with the alphabet, but we're not necessarily worried about them having, correct spelling and grammar and things like that. We're just looking for them to be experimenting and experiencing using those letters for writing. And so for students who are in that early just putting letters together stage, when they're talking about their topic, you want to say to them, what other letters do you want to tell me about this? So just encouraging them to write more. And then once they're working towards, more conventional writing, then you would say, what other words do you want to tell me about this? So this is a great visual that I love. So is it writing? So a quick check. Some things are writing, some things are not. So writing with inventive spelling, strings of letters, there's the word cut in here, but not sure what that really was supposed to be, right? But that's still writing. Think of a toddler who kind of scribbles, right? And maybe makes some like letter approximations or things like that. That's beginning writing. Words or phrases or sentences. So working through puppy, that's all writing. When we're asking kids to choose symbols to write a sentence, that's not considered writing because they're not working with letters. So writing is working with the smallest pieces of the word, which is letters. That's how we're answering that question for. This is how we're building that knowledge. So while it can be helpful for our students, and sometimes students might show us, so they might say, oh, I want to say this about my topic, right? So if they're talking about a dog, they might want to say big. So they say it on their device, then you say, great, now you write big. And then they go and they put their letters in. If it's not BIG, that's still fine. We're going to let them do what they want. And then we might say, that's so great. You wrote 4 letters to say big. I'm going to show you how I write big. And then you're going to take their pencil and do BIG, right? Tracing is not writing, again, because they haven't come up with that thought necessarily. And then things like fill in the blank and things like copying. So we want to make sure that when we're talking about writing, it's students composing using letters. And it's going to we're going to talk about the developmental writing scale. But it's going to go all the way from, like scribbles or random letter sequences all the way through hopefully like paragraphs, someday, right? And for some students, not for everybody. Okay, so all students should have access to write with the full alphabet. We know a lot about how writing and reading go together, right? So that encoding and decoding are 2 skills that are really important and kind of help build off each other as students are really learning those foundational reading skills. So great, it's really important for them to have access to the full alphabet. Writing develops across a continuum. It goes all the way from drawing. Think about things that we're asking kindergartners to do, draw pictures, and then maybe we do labeling of the picture, or we write a list about the things in the picture. Can look very different than students who are writing, a paragraph or a few sentences about their topic. So we want students to be able to write for authentic purposes. So writing about, I love using photographs. So if parents can send in photographs about things that they, maybe they went on a trip this summer that this child really likes to talk about, or maybe there's a picture of a family member that they really like to talk about, or a pet, right? Things that are motivating. And then thinking about things students like. So I was with a student yesterday, not a student with a low incidence disability, but he loved Minecraft. And so I quick pulled a Minecraft GIF off of the internet for him to write about. And he really thought that was really funny and engaging, and then was willing to engage with me a little bit more on that than if I had just said, let's write a small moment about a time something very Lucy, like we gotta love our Lucy Calkins, but we want to help kids brainstorm things that they can talk about. And then we want to attribute meaning to their writing. So when they're doing this emergent writing, we want to count the letters they've written. We want to use letters within their words to model words that are associated with the topic. So for example, if, a student's writing about a dog and they have a string of letters that there's a D in there, you want to point out that D. Oh, this is letter D. D says D. That's the first sound I hear in dog. D, dog. Let's write dog. And then you're going to write it together. So we're never telling them that what they're writing is wrong, but we're trying to help them see how they're building from that emergent writing. And what else did I want to say in here? We're going to model sounding out, inventive spelling, things like that. And we're going to provide that feedback to our students. This is the developmental writing scale. I'm going to click on it so we can see it a little bit bigger. And there's a much longer document that has lots of visuals of what each individual kind of writing looks like. But this is a really nice 1-pager. And sometimes I think 1 page is easier to look at, especially in, Zoom on a big group. But so like level 1 is drawing. So they're using lines and curves to appear to represent objects. We've got scribbling. We've got letter strings. So no groups. It's just a long line of letters. There's no spaces, things like that. We've got letter strings that are grouped into words. So again, still random letters that don't go together, but we understand that there's spaces somewhere, right? We might have one intelligible word, and it goes all the way down to 3 or more related paragraphs of at least 3 sentences each. So obviously this is a wide range. So the developmental writing scale, which is part of the first author curriculum, and I know some of our instructional teachers have it and some don't, but so if you look in there, if you do have access to that resource, or if someone in your building has access to that resource, there are, they give you ideas of kind of, okay, if I have a student who's at level 9, how do I move them to 10, right? How am I moving them through that? Obviously, that's not an emergent student, but this is still something we would use when we're talking about conventional writing. So again, it's a strategy that we'll talk about in the conventional section. Any
Bridget,
questions?
what was the resource you just mentioned about the writing?
So the first author, developmental writing scale. So
First
this is the
author,
developmental
okay.
writing scale, and then first author, which is the Don Johnston curriculum. So it's like a workshop model, but built around it's built around this and how we move students through these. Students who are obviously taking longer to move through them, right? Kindergartners can go through lots of these in a very quick amount of time, right? That kindergarten, first grade, we're always making huge gains really quickly, but our students might stay a little bit longer. And so it's going to give you ideas on that. Okay, so here's independent writing resources for you, lots of different things, different alternative pencils you can look at, 10 tips for partner assisted scanning. So if you have a student who can't point to things, where you're going to do the pointing and then wait, and they're going to give you a yes or no response. We can also talk about teaching yes or no on another day, but something to work there. This is the link to the full developmental writing scale. It's many pages and goes through each individual one, gives you a picture of what it might look like, or more than one picture of what it might look like, and then kind of goes from there. There's some sample IEP goals for emergent writers, if that's something that because I know, like, right, we always have to have that in the back of our mind that we have to write an IEP. And so how are we connecting what we're doing back to that? And then some different things here. So unique has an emergent writing rubric. So if unique is something you're using in your class, this might be something that you can look at here. And then the bridge assessment is, I think it's out of Canada, but it's got some great questions in it that you can be asking about students, and you're kind of putting them on a continuum. And again, it can help you kind of figure out how we're moving them from one spot to the next, or maybe not necessarily how to move them, but like what the next thing is. And then we can brainstorm for how do we get there. Okay, I know I'm going really fast. So self-selected reading. So students are selecting books to read on their own, and these can include trade books, class-created books like Dottie was talking about, always so motivating. Tar Heel readers. So those are digital books that are online. They're short. They're usually very short text-wise, variety of topics. For DLM, all the texts that they use for DLM are available on Tar Heel Shared Reader. So they have like Anne of Green Gables, they have Henry and Mudge, like adapted versions. You can do articles if you have colleagues in the building who have like Time for Kids or Scholastic, and maybe they get 25, but they only have 22 kids and they want to share with you. That might be a way to grab some things that are a little bit different. We've got Mayan, Epic, books, Reading A to Z, wordless picture books, alphabet books. So just lots of things. And then in shared reading, teachers are conferencing with students, just like our general education colleagues are doing with their students in their classrooms, to talk about what the student is doing when they're reading a book, and provide them support and scaffolding that they might need to grow as a reader. So, are we looking at the words? Are we pointing to them? Can we identify letters that we know or words that we know? Things like that. This is my caveat. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to look at this, and then I'm going to ask someone to volunteer to read it for me. Okay, so who would like to read it? Nobody, right? Because what does it say? We don't know. For years in education, we have symbolized text. This is what this text says. And research, and I symbolized all kinds of things. I created Reading A to Z books with symbolized text. I had somebody say to me once in an observation that Boardmaker threw up in my room, and that was a very appropriate comment. Everything had a symbol on it. Every word on my word wall, everything. But research actually shows us that it's actually more distracting, especially when we're talking about words that are abstract and difficult to portray as one single symbol. They do support communication, and so that's something different that we're going to talk about. But when we're really trying to focus on reading words, we do not want to have symbols associated with it. There is no research that tells us that this actually helps with comprehension. So for example, is this help or is it drowning, right? I always hated this help picture because I never want my students to drown, right? What does this mean? Who knows, right? Some of these things are very difficult to be able to portray in a symbol that makes sense no matter what. If I asked you to draw a picture of pizza, we would all have a very kind of similar picture. If I asked you to draw a picture of the word the, everybody's would look very different. So just something to think about in the resources that you have. I know some of the curricular resources that we have do have symbolized text in them. So I would encourage you to look at the versions of those things that don't have the symbolized text and trying to use those instead. So that, again, if you have questions about that specifically about a resource or something like that, feel free to reach out to me, your coach, and we can kind of help work through that together. But I would encourage you not to use symbolized text if you can't. So symbol supported text does not support individual word identification or comprehension. So just something to know. Again, I had a whole classroom library full of it, but when we know better, we do better, right? So we're always evolving. Here's just some ideas of 9 ways to read when you can't read. And so kind of how are we helping students start to build those skills when they're still non-readers, right? Because when we're talking about these emergent students, they're still non-readers. And I'm going to keep going because you guys can go back and look at this. Self-selected reading, not a whole ton of resources here, but if there's questions that you have about it, feel free to reach out. I can always try to dig something up if you need something specific. Okay. Any questions about emergent before we try to do a really quick, probably not going to get to our last thing, and I apologize because I did not want to talk to you for 2.5 hours, but moving through those conventional routines. Any questions about emergent? Okay. So some of these you'll see are the same. So these are our conventional routines. We've got reading comprehension, word identification and decoding. We've got structured independent writing, self-selected reading. So that's going to be the same. We're not going to go over that again. And then communication with symbols and writing. So reading comprehension, we're going to use a guided reading based approach. And so what we're doing here is working with students on how we comprehend and how we analyze text. So typically done in a small group using a book, that's at a student's instructional level. We're going to activate background knowledge. And the really interesting thing that we're going to do here is the background knowledge that we're going to activate isn't necessarily about the topic of the book, right? So if we're reading a book about the zoo, we're not necessarily going to talk about the zoo. But if we want them to be able to work on sequencing the book, we're going to start with having them sequence maybe what are the first 3 things you do when you get to school in the morning. So we've practiced that idea of sequencing. Now that we understand it and can apply it to our personal life, something we do every day, how do we apply it to this story that we just read? So just a little bit a different way to think about it. And then we're going to set a purpose for reading, because if we don't tell students why they're reading, the reason they're reading is to remember everything to answer a question. Or they don't know. And so they're not really sure what to hone in on and what to look for. And so helping set that purpose for why they're reading is important. And we might take one text and read it multiple times, but with a different purpose each time we read it. So again, the students are already familiar with the story, but we're asking them to do different cognitive, like analytical things with it as we, as they learn more and they move through it. So the authors advocate for something called the anchor, read, apply framework. So you're going to anchor. So what you're going to do is activate a student's background knowledge. Again, like I said, related to the purpose of reading, not related to the content. So if you want them to sequence, if you want them to, pick out specific facts, things like that, you're going to do your background knowledge related to that purpose. And then you're going to set the purpose for reading. Today, we're going to read 2 and then tell them why. Then you're going to read the text straight through, and then you're going to complete the task, complete a task that's aligned with your purpose. So are you going to put things in order? Are you going to finish filling out a KWL? A yes or no is where you have some, it's kind of like true false. So maybe you have like 4 statements and the students have to say if they think yes, that's a, like true, or no, false. And then you're going to go back and look at it again and see, were they right or wrong, and make changes as needed. There's some reading comprehension modules in DLM that get very specific in kind of what this looks like. Again, this is going to feel this is going to feel very different from the predictable chart writing that Dottie talked about, because that has some very specific like ways we go about it. It's very structured, whereas this isn't. So this is something where, if you want to work through that with one of your coaches or things like that, might be a good way to kind of work through what this looks like, because it's a little bit different. That's all there. Okay. So word identification and decoding. So we're going to talk about a couple of different strategies under this umbrella. So we've got making words, we've got word wall, and then we've got keyword decoding. Danielle Borsellino is going to talk to you guys really quick about, or not really quick, but she's going to talk to you guys about making words, because that's something she's been doing in her class this year. And I'm going to run to the bathroom while she's talking, but I'll still listen.
All right, so I have been using the making words with a small group of my students in my class, some 2nd graders and some 5th graders. So I use it with like the upper elementary age kids, and we use the making words. And what I really like about it is that the lesson is very scripted. I use it and then I actually hand it off to the plan time sub. So it's very seamless, like in between. And it's very scripted, and you go and you're given 5 to like 7 letters that you're using, and you're almost like word chaining. You have them kind of build words, and you practice on kind of segmenting and blending the words, and then chaining and making new words. So let's say the word is also, you're gonna take 2 letters to make the word in, and they'll have the letters I and N, and they probably won't have any more vowels. They won't have any, like a ton of other letters. And then I often will tell them to kind of cover the word that they made, and let's see what's other sounds that we can hear. And I want you to make the word it, and they'll have the letter T, and I have them try to find it, and they're building it. All of my kids, they do know all the letter names, they know all the letter sounds, and we do some of those other phonemic awareness activities like other parts of the day. And you're kind of going through and building the words. So a lot of them are sight words, but they're not, but they're also words that you can sound out, and they're single syllable word kind of things. At the very end of the lesson, what you do is you have like word cards already made with them, and they're gonna read the words, and then you're gonna sort the words. So sort all the words that start with the letter with a different letter, or sort all the words that have the am word in it. And they sort kind of all the words. And the last part of this program is that you are kind of supposed to make them into like a word wall. And I don't do this part with my class because I do other words that we kind of use as more high frequency and word wall in that aspect, but that's another piece that you can do. The other thing that I really like about making words is that every like 10th lesson is like a review, and it's kind of a built-in progress monitoring piece, because I kind of give them all the letters and I say, what are all the words that you can make? And we start with kind of that, and I'm able to just kind of jot down. So they're able to, I know, kind of spell them and read them. And I do see that like transfer to their writing during our independent writing time and like our guided reading times.
And Danielle, remind me, what resource are you using it from? Readtopia or Literacy Through Word Power?
Readtopia.
You're using Retopia. Awesome. So you'll see here, thank you so much, Danielle. I appreciate it. You'll see here at the end, I have links to a couple different things that are set up. So Making Words is a strategy that's put together by Dr. Patricia Cunningham. And then we have several resources available to us where people have adapted it for students with complex communication needs, students with more significant disabilities. And put them together. So Danielle is using the Retopia. So that's, we talked about that earlier. It's Don Johnson's literacy curriculum. And they have, again, some free resources. So their Making Words lessons are on there. And then through the AAC Language Lab, which is through PRC and Saltillo, who make like, they're kind of two of the big two for AAC devices. They have something called literacy through, there's literacy through word power, literacy through Unity. So you work through these Making Words lessons, and then they introduce word wall words, and you use the student's device to teach them. So it's a way to kind of reinforce those literacy skills, but also make it connect to their AAC device, which is great. So, and we have, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was like, I do have one of the students does use a device. So they do that aspect. I don't always do it during like our Making Words time, but I kind of build it in through some other parts of the day. But I do have one of the students who uses a device that is in the group.
Sure.
So,
so yeah, I love it. So we have 4 steps in Making Words, like Danielle just kind of took you through, and then you're going to do the lesson, and then the next day you're going to move to the next lesson. So we had some really good discussions in our class over the winter about like, when do you move on, and kind of what does that look like? Are we looking for a level of mastery, or are we just continuing to move through? And you're just going to go to the next lesson. A lot of the letters repeat, so you're continuing to work on some of the same sounds. You're just putting them together in different ways. Again, we've got literacy through Unity, literacy through we've got literacy through word power. You've got Retopia. We could get the kindergarten Making Words book. There's lots of ways for us to kind of put together those lessons. And once you understand the format, it would be very easy to drop your own set of letters in there if you needed to. I'm going to show, this is a video of a student in the district doing a Making Word lesson, never done one before. And so I'm just going to give you, we won't watch the whole thing because I think it's like 11 minutes long or something, or 13 minutes long. So that's about how long the lessons take. Again, I'm doing it with one student. So Danielle might tell you it takes a little bit longer because she's doing it in a small group. Danielle, do you think you have an idea of how long it takes? Give or take.
I do it. So I do it with a group of 3 students, and there's a lot of attention issues with them, and we get it done in under 20 minutes. No, right around 20 to 30, I would say.
Perfect. Perfect. So I'm just going to show you a short part of this. Again, you can always go back and watch the whole thing. There's 2 little, she looked at the camera, tried to not have her identity there, though I'm sure some of you know her, but so yeah, a couple of spots where I like spliced it so you couldn't see her because she looked back at the person who was videoing. All right, so here is what we're going to do today. So we're going to make some words. We have some letters. We're going to use them, let's right side up. We're going to use them to make some words, okay? Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to tell you the names of the letters, and you're going to say them with me, okay? S, A, D, H, N. Awesome. All right, now we're going to say the sound that the letter makes. Ready? Right? Awesome. Okay. So now I'm going to ask you to take 2 letters and make the word an. I can paint an animal. An. Which 2 letters can we use to make an? This. Okay. What letter is this? D. And what sound does it make? Let's look at it. D. You're right. Do you hear the sound D in an? You do? Yeah. Where? An. Do you hear D? An. Oh, okay. So you have an. An. What other letter do we need to make an? Do we need a, D, or H? Hey. Okay, let's try it.
Okay. Let's do it.
All right. What sound?
H.
And it says,
Hand.
Does that say an?
No.
Okay. So we have to say, it's not H, right? We tried that one. An. What letter says a?
A.
You made an. A-N, an.
An.
Awesome. All right. Oh, we're going to leave it here. Watch, because we're going to do something with it. All right. Now I want you to take the N away and put a different letter in its place to make the word as. So we looked up as the plane flew over. So that one's going to stay. What are we going to put after our A? As.
S.
Yes. As. Nice job. A-S. As.
Away.
Oh, nope, we're going to leave it. Just wait. Now we're going to add one more letter to make the three-letter word has. She has some money. Ooh, so we have as.
As.
We're trying to make has. Has. We're going to add one letter, and we're going to make the word has. So here we have as, which is kind of a silly one because it says S instead of Z. We want to add one letter to make has. Ooh, that's a good choice. Let's try it. Ooh, oh. Okay. What letter does N make?
N.
As. Naz. Is that has?
Yeah.
It is.
No.
No. I muted. One thing I did incorrectly in this video, which I should refilm it for you, is then you can use the word cards, which you won't see till a little bit later, and we're going to keep going, but then you can have them look at the actual word and then make changes. So that's one thing I should have done that I didn't do in here. But again, like this is like the first time she's doing it. I've done this very intermittently, so not necessarily my best teaching, but as you'll get used to it, it will hopefully feel a little bit better. Any thoughts or questions after watching the student do?
The way I have them make corrections is that I have a student that did it correctly come up to the board and make the word, and then everybody can then make the word based on how the student came up and spelled it, which I've been trained by Dr. Koppenhaver. I always say his name wrong, and that's how he suggested doing it, and it works really well, and they love coming up to the board.
That's fantastic. I love that, Maddie. That's great. I didn't know you had worked with Dr. Koppenhaver, so that's great. So that's a great strategy. So just again, like it's all there for you once you have the letter tiles made. Again, it's not a ton of prep. One thing that's kind of nice is you could put the PDF on your teacher iPad in iBooks, and then you could like highlight things, and it will just kind of stay where you are. So you can just kind of open it again the next time, and it will be right there for you. So just one strategy that I heard recommended at a conference that I thought was really nice. So then you're going to do word ball words. So usually 5 a week. And these are words that you're expecting the students to read automatically and to be able to spell in their writing, but by the end of the school year. So you're not necessarily looking for mastery at the end of 1 week, but over time. And then you're going to work on knowing where they are in the student's AAC device. A lot of them are going to be high frequency words. They can be words that the teacher identifies. And again, 5 words a week. And then you're going to practice them with like a word wall chant or cheer. You can read the word wall. So just some different activities you can do there. You can have it up on your, like a board in your room. But you can also have like a personal one that students have like in a file folder at their desk or things like that. So just one way to do it. And you're just going to continue to add to it over time. Keyword decoding, it's kind of like the idea of word families. So you're going to look at common spelling patterns to help learners read and write new words. And then you're going to have like a key word for each one so that they can think back to that word and then like adapt that word to get to the new word they want. So if your keyword for UCK was duck and they're trying to write luck, then you would talk about, okay, we're going to take off that first sound because it's different. What letter do we need to add to uck to make luck instead of duck? Things like that. So here are some resources for you. So Readtopia, Making Words resources. That's the one that Danielle is using. Maddie, I'm not sure. What resources are you using?
It's the same one as Danielle.
Awesome. So Maddie's also using that one. So great resources for you if that's one you want to jump into. There's the AAC Language Lab, Literacy Through Word Power. That's like a paid, AAC Language Lab is paid, but I've paid for it. And so I've downloaded it, and this should be a drive link to it for you. But if not, let me know. I can always do it and send it to you. Making Word, there's lots of Making Words books on Amazon that are by Patricia Cunningham. So if you feel like students need some additional practice, there's definitely ways we can pull those together. Independent writing. So for independent writing, we're going to use it's very similar to our general education colleagues. We're going to use a writer's workshop structure. So you're going to do a mini lesson, then students are going to write, and then at the end, you're going to do like a share out, right? So just giving them some opportunities to share their writing and feel proud about it. They call it like author's chair. So you could have like a special chair they sit in or something like that, if that's something you wanted to do, or if there's something else you wanted to call it, you could always do that as well. So some mini lesson topics might be picking a topic, editing, revising. How do we use the word wall when there's words that we know are up there and we want to write them? Conventions, so capitals, punctuation, and then writing for a specific audience. Use of visuals. So lots of little kids, when they start writing, right, we base it off a drawing. And our kids, some of them can draw, and that's great, but some of them maybe aren't going to be able to do that. And so that's where photographs are going to be a really great way to have them be engaged and to have some like shared understanding about what they're writing about, so you can help facilitate, like help move them through that process. So pictures from home, you could take pictures from around school. I had, a student who loved the custodian. So like you could have pictures of the custodians doing something at lunch or things like that, just thinking about things that the kids like. You can also do pictures from the internet for topics that they like. So, and like really silly things, like I always say to kids, and I'll do like something with like burping or, poop or whatever. I'm like, don't tell my children because I don't allow this at home, but here at school to get you to write, we will have a pooping unicorn. So just how do we do that? And then, so the tools that the student might need. So if they are using an alternative pencil, we want to do some modeling for them during that writer's workshop. So we might be working independently with this, or like individually with the student, and showing them how to use it on their iPad, or, if it's paper or things like that. So just kind of giving them some kind of direct instruction or modeling on what it looks like to use whatever pencil that we've kind of picked for them. You're going to conference with them. So things that you might conference about would be to like add to the writing. So like, tell me more. What other words do you want to tell me about this picture from grandma's house? Or you might talk about editing. So, okay, every period has to end, or every sentence has to end with a period. Let's look at your writing and see where we might need to put one. So again, working with them to learn how to use their individual pencil. If it's something that's going to take a little bit more direct teaching, this is a time where you can do that. And also talking about ideas for future topics. So like coming up with those things together. Something that I've seen before as well is like you have kids think of a topic and then think of 5 things. So like winter, there's snowmen, there's hot chocolate, there's like a lot of the things that Dottie had for her writing. And then you can say like, okay, do you want to write about winter? You could write about, having hot chocolate, or sledding, or whatever it is that they like. And then again, at the end, you're having them share. So just kind of, reaffirming that they are a writer and that they're doing those things. So again, and that might look very different in first grade versus 11th grade, like in Megan's class or in Crystal's class might look a little bit different, but we can still do some sharing. Independent writing resources for you. Again, I'm not going to click on them, but if you have questions once you look at them, feel free to let me know. So communication with symbols and spelling. So why aren't symbols enough, right? So we have communication systems that are built with symbols. They're already in there. Why do we also need to work on this spelling? Then they can only communicate the words I choose. So, or me, or the teacher, or the speech path, whoever is the I choosing that, they don't have any way to add words that they, are interested in, that they heard about. I know, I think Alice is with us today, and she was telling me about a group she had with a student where one student had a word in their device and the other student didn't. And then that student was really kind of focused on getting that word in his device because he did not have it in there. But he has he has the ability to use the keyboard and type it in for himself. Even though he could have maybe asked Alice to put it in there, he was able to do it. So Sometimes we might be excited about a topic, or a student might be interested in a topic that like we don't think of. And this is a way for them to help start to add to some of those things. And usually we're looking at like fringe vocabulary. A lot of our core words are already there, but these would be fringe. And while core is really important because we can use it a lot of places, fringe vocabulary, which are a lot of nouns or topic specific, are really important because those are the things kids are motivated to talk about. So just thinking about there. So how do we teach that? We're going to model using their symbols and using the alphabet to type words. So for example, earlier this year, I was in Megan A's room at York, and they were doing some voting as part of a homecoming activity or activity she had homecoming week for them. They were voting on some things. And I was working with a paraprofessional who was supporting a student, and she wanted to use the word vote, and she looked, it wasn't in there. So she, without any prompting, went to the alphabet page and wrote the word voted. And she was like, oh, you voted for Scooby Dukes or whatever. I don't know what it was. But it was just so great to see her do it kind of authentically. Like I didn't tell her to do that. She just knew like, oh, we need to talk about this and it's not in there. So you're just going to model that for them. And then making sure that we're choosing a system that has access to the full alphabet. So if you're using Touch Chat, if you're using a word power vocabulary, it has it. These two here, this is the 80 and this is the 104, I think. They have that alphabet already set up on that first page. So you don't even need to navigate to get to those letters there. So that's a really nice one, especially if you have students with, more developed literacy skills and they're able to access, the smaller icons. This one here is the alphabet page that's in Word Power 60 Basic, which is what a lot of our students are on. And this is like here, if I clicked on the ABCD, it would take me to a new page that would have one individual letter per cell. And so this is something that I created in a different vocabulary for a student. So just something to think about. Okay. We have 10 minutes, so I'm just going to skip this and do a wrap up really quick. I'm so sorry that we did not get to any work time. So I really apologize for that because I did not want to talk to you for this length of time. So I'm sorry. So if you are interested in, trying anything or you need any help with it, again, like I said, your coach, me, happy to help. So happy to do that. So just a couple of wrap up things for us here. It says, for too long, we've put the proverbial cart before the horse and worried too much about assessing progress without doing what students need to make progress in the first place. Just get started. And that just get started part is what really hits home for me. Like we just have to do it. So just starting somewhere and then working through the messiness to get to where we want to go, I think it can be hard sometimes, but I think our students they deserve it. And I think it will be really exciting and rewarding to see them making those gains. And then this is the very last little part in the book, and it's just my favorite. It says, very few students with significant disabilities will learn to read and write without teachers, therapists, parents, caregivers, and others who are willing to tackle the complex work of teaching literacy. Students with significant disabilities have everything to gain from increased efforts to teach them to read and write in meaningful ways. We owe it to them to dig in. So it's going to be messy. It's going to be awkward sometimes, but just trying it and being okay with it being messy and it being awkward. I think our students, they're so lucky to have all of you who are here today doing some great reflection on what you're doing. And so I think that sky's the limit for what we can do for them. So any questions? I'm so sorry that I talked so long. I should have known in advance that I would talk this long, but I'm really sorry about it.
Bridget, I just love your passion and your dedication, especially for this population, because we all know how hard our teachers, our therapists are working. And I think, they don't get enough credit. There's obviously a lot going on, district wide, and we are a very small portion of D205, but I don't know, just so you guys know, we see you, we hear you, and we're hopefully giving you guys what you need. And if you ever need anything, Bridget, you're an awesome resource. I'm like, yes. So I don't know, Michelle and Megan, we didn't get a chance to talk, but I'm like, let's have, Bridget come in. So.
Well, thank you. I'm always, I'm always in awe every time I walk into a classroom at all the things that are getting done with our students on a daily basis. So I hope no one feels like I'm like singling anybody out or saying anything. We all work, we all do our best with the information we have. And when we have new information, then we do new things. So I'm hoping this is helping you think about some new things that you could do. Again, no need to jump into all the routines on Tuesday, but again, like Dottie said, can you dip your toe into something and kind of looking at what's the best bang for your buck? And then when you're feeling comfortable, what else would you be willing to look at adding? I think is a great way to kind of start doing that. And
I was just going to add, sorry, one other thing
No.
that Bridget has helped with, I know, especially in multi-needs at the elementary level, is helping come up with IEP goals for some of our students that are like in the emergent or conventional, where like it's more of a team goal. So like if you have meetings coming up too that you're kind of struggling on, how do I write a goal? She's also a good resource to come in and help the team brainstorm that.
Happy to do that. And as it is hard, like, right, we all have to connect it back to the IEP. And so that's something that's hard. Like, I feel like so much of this is so great, but it's how do we connect it back so that we feel like we're, being accountable for what it is that we're doing, and families feel like that too. So if that's something you need to work through, please feel free to let me know. Shameless plug for myself. So I am once again teaching the introductory course for this book. So it's a D205 course. You get 1 credit on your lane advancement. If you're already at Masters plus 40, you get paid for the credit. So at the end of the class, you just fill out a form in PD Express, and I think you make like $450 for taking the class. So think about that. We meet every other Tuesday starting January 18th. So this coming Tuesday, again, like Colleen said, the district buys the book for you. And we're just kind of working through the book a little more in depth as opposed to my lightning round of that I did today. And we're meeting on Zoom from 7 to 9. So you can be at home in comfy clothes, you can have a fun drink, whatever it is that kind of gets you motivated to do it. And I know some in here have taken the class. Hopefully you didn't think it was terrible or, it was worth your time. So I currently have 6 people signed up for it, and I have to have 10 to run the class. And I know some of the people who are signed up are really hoping to be able to have it go on. So if you're thinking about it or you're on the fence, I promise I won't make it terrible. So there is like 1 hour a week that's considered like asynchronous time. And essentially it's just, you get time to read the book. So we meet in person for 2 hours, and then you're given like credit for an hour for reading through, reading the assigned readings. And there's a little final project at the end. Nothing crazy though. And I try to really make it something you can actually use. So any thoughts, or anybody who took it that wants to be like, it wasn't terrible? Or
I was just going to say, like, if you're thinking about it, definitely do it. It's a great class. You're going to learn a lot from Bridget.
Thank you.
Yeah. I would say being older instructional, where a lot of my kids are all of my kids are even in the higher level, everything was really helpful, and it's helped a lot of like my literacy time in my classroom. So
awesome. Thank you, Danielle. The district asked for 2 reflection questions. Does anyone know how they're actually answering these? I just was told to give questions. I don't know. Any coaches know the answer to this? I'm sorry. Sometimes I don't know what's going on because I'm not really in a group.
There's an exit slip. Is it on the Institute Day agenda, I think?
I think it is. And we also need to make sure that we sign out.
Yes, please.
At 1:30.
Sign out. Thank you.
Institute Day agenda.
Yes. So these are my questions. If there's other ones there, just answer whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me. But so just, if you're thinking about any shifts in your instruction, what might that look like? And then what additional learning do you need, or support do you need to be able to implement any piece of this with your students? Because again, I'm happy to help. Your coaches are happy to help. So, we're happy to dig in with it with you. Heather and I have done some stuff with Amy and Dottie, and I think it's gone really well. Dottie's been able to really help Amy. So I think we've got a lot of great resources in the district to be able to start, moving toward this idea of comprehensive literacy for all of our students.
Okay, hold on. It was not there. Here I have the reflection form for the afternoon in an email. Let me grab that.
I'm so sorry. I should have looked at that.
No, I mean, here's the sign out that says it should be as close to 1:30 as possible. And then not to mix that up with the exit slip, which includes the reflection.
Thank you. So this is just a little, not that there aren't 1,000 links, so my apologies for overlinking you today, but just some additional resources for you. This first one here just takes you to a Google Doc with some resources. So there's a disability podcast that did a whole kind of like in-depth dive into the book Comprehensive Literacy for All, and then it's all in podcast. So they talk to like different people in the field and they look at some of the specific things. So that's all there, as well as 2 podcasts from the, or 3 podcasts, I think, from Talking with Tech, but one is with Dr. Karen Erickson, or it's a 2-parter, and she's speaking with Erin Sheldon, who, if you're not familiar with Erin Sheldon, she's a special education teacher and mother of a daughter with Angelman syndrome. She lives in, I believe she lives in Ontario, and she is a wealth of knowledge for literacy and just instruction in general for students with more significant disabilities. So that's great. This is, again, the full link to that little video we watched in the beginning. It's a really awesome speech. It's an hour, again, podcast, play it faster, it'll be great. And then literacy instruction for all.ca is a great site that's put together by Dr. Koppenhaver with, I believe it's Ontario again, and everything is divided out by emergent, conventional, and then there's resources for each individual routine. Project Core is a great one, dynamic learning maps, and then there's some like the free resources from Readtopia, Don Johnston, for you there. Okay, I'm so sorry I talked for all that time. So I apologize for that. Please feel free to mark me down on whatever you have to fill out. If anybody has any questions, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to stay on and answer them. Otherwise, have a lovely rest of your day, and please enjoy your well-deserved break after we've been in school 6 days, but still, you still deserve it. So thank you so much for hanging in with me today, guys.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Hyperlinks.
Definitely. And with everyone in the room, or a few people still standing in admin, can I just put out there too, I think I'm getting a lot of questions over like different components as far as like what resources are we using, how this fits in, what does it mean for our standards? So can I just put that on our admin radar, and we can always debrief and continue to talk and problem solve that. But I just want everyone to know too that like that has been put out. We are trying to move forward and kind of help piece all this together. And that's all I got for a Friday afternoon. You guys have such a good long weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. You did a great job.
You're welcome. Sorry I talked so long. Ooh.
Thanks, Bridget.
Okay.
Yep. Bye.
We just
guys.
needed more. Bye. We needed more time because it was really great. I think you
I
did
know.
a
I'm
good job.
sorry.
No, I mean, why are you apologizing?
I know. It's just everybody's so quiet, and so then you're just like, oh my god, I'm just talking about this whole time. But
What
oh
I
well, what are you
I
gonna
was messaging with Colleen that what we should probably start to think about. So we did get some extra money through our rollover from last year, and I think we have to think about there really is such limited time during the day for everybody to be able to get together to kind of do this work together, and maybe we need to think about like how can we get work groups together, pay them, pay paraprofessionals to stay, and even like maybe pay to do like make and takes with parents, and maybe not even make and takes, but just training, to have them come in to train them. So not to pay parents, pay the staff that are going to stay to help them.
Totally. And I think like I have so many ideas of things. I feel like COVID has just messed everything up, because like things that I was like, there's this other woman in this other district and she does this great parent make and take night, and I want to do it so bad, but it's just like things have just been so crazy with COVID.
Yeah, we might have to wait till it gets a little, maybe at the springtime, it'll be better. It'll be easier. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Have a great weekend, you guys.
Thank you
so much.
Bye.
Bye.
You'll see my text message in a second. I celebrated the fact that Kevin is now not the only one who said poop during a presentation.
Oh, I don't know what you're talking. I saw that text message, but I don't remember him doing that.
He had to say poop and diarrhea so many times when he first presented about COVID, and it was like the staff had ever like experienced him. So it was like our running joke for a long time, like, great first impression, Kevin, talking about poop and diarrhea. Thank you.
Oh.
Oh, well, I'm so glad I can help take that off his shoulders.
He's not the only one anymore.
Hey,
All right,
unicorn
yeah.
poop gets kids really engaged. So I
Yeah,
don't know what to tell you.
yeah.
So, all right.
Well,
Bye,
there's a whole
guys.
song about it.
Bye.
All right, bye.